Great. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Startup Grind. I want to thank the audience for joining us and also our panelists to talk more on Web3, how to embrace your decentralized audience. And so my name is Joanne, and I lead many of the crypto investments for Samsung Next. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with what Samsung Next is, we are a venture firm that's affiliated with Samsung Electronics. And our mission is to support and back the best founders, the boldest founders in areas that we care about. And so as part of that, we found that a lot of these smart and best founders were spending a lot of time and energy in this area of Web3, call it blockchain, call it crypto. And what we think is it's simply just the next evolution of the internet. And so as part of that, we've been really fortunate to invest, starting with Dapper Labs and CryptoKitties as early as 2017, 2018. And recently, I've led additional investments in FTX, Axie Infinity, Off-Chain Labs, and also Metaplex Studios, which we have here today. And so I'm really excited to introduce our panelists. I'm very honored. So starting with Ko Kim, she's head of ecosystem partnerships and marketing at Miston Labs, which is building the foundational infrastructure for Web3. Next, we have Jimmy Mouton, VP of Marketing at Nifty's, which is building the ecosystem platform for NFTs from our favorite brands and creators. And finally, last but not least, we have Stephen Hess, CEO of Metaplex Studios, which is empowering creators through the variety of tools and communities that they're helping build on the Solana ecosystem. And so, now that I'm done with my long monologue, I'll jump into the fun part, which are the questions. And so I'd like to level set, but with the opportunity Web3 brings with communities. And so, of course, today we're all here together in real life, but a lot of our engagements, relationships, and even ownership happen online. And so what we've been seeing are a lot of NFTs, DAO enablement, gathering of these new online communities. And our first question is, can you briefly summarize how you viewed and developed community through your different growths in your different Web3 areas? So starting with you, Ko.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think communities kind of center around basically a narrative. What can they rally upon? What is the main concept and idea that they can rally around such that they can coalesce and get excited and build, make friendships and build friends and all that. And so I've always kind of prefaced, especially when you're coming from an infrastructure company, which is actually pretty hard to explain to your family. I don't know, my mom has no idea what I'm doing, honestly. So, but it's just really about I've always said the best technology may not always win, but good stories rarely lose. And the reason why I say that is really important to hone in on what is the story that you're trying to tell to your target audience, in which case for us, it's really the developers, the people who are building on Web3, right? And for us, it's I want to make them feel really powerful and almost like superheroes. This is they are the creators, they are the arbiters and whatever of destiny. And we need to get them to feel excited, right? Especially with what they build, because we're just only a tool. In the end, we're a tool for them, that we're part of their toolkit to build whatever fantasy or creation that they want. We just need to make them feel that they can make that ultimate creation. And so, and this is kind of famous even among the consumer marketing circles, because that's a lot of where my career has started, is that I don't know if everyone knows what Super Mario is, right? Mario, yes, okay. So there's Mario, there's the Fire Flower, and then there's Fire Mario. And when you're kind of telling a story, you're not telling the story about the Fire Flower, which is actually a very common mistake for most tech startups, is that they sell the tools. They talk about how powerful they are, how much better they are, whatever. No one cares. No, you're not going to build a community around the tool, right? People build communities around personalities, and you got to sell the story of the Fire Mario. Developers want to be Fire Mario. You got to go tell them that story and make them feel that way. So, and I think that's the key concept, and I think that's just really interesting for us because that Fire Mario means a lot of different things depending on the developer. So, but the general framework is pretty much the same. So.
Awesome.
I love that. I have nothing more. No, I think that maybe one other area of focus for us is that we're really leaning into what the blockchain gives you, which is transparency. I love the idea of telling a story. I had 14 years at Nike, and that was 100%. You don't sell people the thing, you sell them what they will be. I love all of that. What's interesting is I'm coming from a place that wasn't transparent. Many of the tactics in which you do tell that story, you own it, and then you'll give little bits of it. And it's been a complete shift for me of this is all incredibly transparent. Everything that we do at Nifty's is about giving away our brand to the community and making them feel like owners from the jump. And so, when you start doing that, you build up this incredible traction very quickly, where even more than like if you went and did a pay-for-play with an influencer of like word of mouth, if you're doing this the right way, if people feel like they are owners and they know where the project sits every week, or they even have interactions with our developers, the word of mouth and the longevity and the traction of that is incredible, right? I mean, just the idea of like, we're so transparent, people have bought in and become employees or moderators for us because they've felt like they know where everything stands, which again, coming from Nike, where it's like, you have no idea how many shoes we're about to drop, like the blockchain there's literally no way to obscure it. So lean into the transparency has been a huge portion of the way that we approach community building.
Yeah, so I guess as context, our journey at Metaplex with community building started less than a year ago, about 10 months now at Bitcoin Miami. And in those early days, the community building process was really hand to hand. And I think some of the themes that Ko, that you touched on about being really vision oriented and helping build a shared story for what that future can look like was really important. Like that's what got us through what we kind of joke as like the glass eating process of 0 to 1 innovation. Like you need to surround yourself with people who really are waking up every day thinking about the problem space and how to move that vision one step forward. Now, we find ourselves with a community that I think, our latest numbers, we have 1.6 million wallets holding Solana NFTs. It's over 10 million that have been minted through the protocol. And now, like, our community has become much more complex, where we're really needing to develop an understanding of the different pockets of our community and how to best serve them. And that means like the sort of proliferation of that vision conversation. Like there's the developer, Fire Mario. There's the creator that's building their new IP that could become, an international brand and franchise. And then you have people who are exploring the edges of this technology and breaking into new sectors in media and entertainment, content distribution, gaming. And so I think now we're trying to figure out how to scale that energy, like how to keep that fire, that sort of 0 to 1 fire, but do so now in a more sort of scaled and structured way.
Got it. Really interesting. So I just want to unpack what each of you touched on further, starting with because you're obviously playing at different verticals within the Web3 sector, and so Ko, I know you're building a layer 1 blockchain suite through Miston Labs, which just can you dive into a little bit further about how you are building that infrastructure and that Fire Mario, and I know you just started last year, and so would really love to hear how you're building from 0 to 1.
Well, I personally only started in January, but the company started in November. But thank you. But yeah, it's interesting because I'm not going to say I'm the one building infrastructure. We have people much smarter than I am, and the biggest joke I say is that I work with big brains, right? Like, and it's pretty humbling. It's really exciting. It makes me want to do more. And then I always kind of joke our like ecosystem team is like big heart, and but a lot of it's like how do we like kind of incorporate that feeling of like connectedness and like kind of just something of building more. And so I think like for us, it's like you always have to start small. I think when you're going from 0 to 1, and I've started a bunch of D2C brands actually in my previous life, and so that's like pure cold start marketing, and it's really, and I think for us it's like we're kind of like we've done tons of experiments. So it's like I always say, experiment. Don't be afraid to A/B test your narrative and A/B test it everywhere you go. Like whether it's in conversation, whether it's in whether it's on your social media, social media is the greatest way to A/B test your narrative, by the way, at scale. So, and you constantly want to see like what are niches and what people attach to, because you're going to find trends. You'll find trends talking to investors. You'll find trends talking to peers within your tech network. You'll find trends even within the NFT space. And so I think with that, it's kind of like, that's kind of like the stage that we're at right now, is like we're in vast experimentation stage. Because essentially, as much as you're trying to build a shared vision of the brand, and as Jimmy has mentioned, of like how do you get people to own into that, we want our users to contribute to that, right? Mm-hmm. And so in one sense, the experimentation phase allows us to touch as many different communities as possible to kind of bring in their own contribution to that narrative and their own feedback.
Actually, I had a personal question. So your origin story for Mistin Labs, I think some of the audience here aren't as crypto native, so I think it'd be really to kind of paint that picture. Yeah, so Mistin Labs is founded by kind of like some of the more original engineers and R&D group within Facebook's, which is now Meta's Novi team, so on the crypto team. So this is the same group that has invented both the smart contract language called Move. We've also had the same cryptographers who's built a lot of the innovations considering our consensus algorithms. And Sui in itself, our thought is that so far, like, Web3 has been what we call Internet of Verified Records, and basically it's only read-only, whereas if you think about assets, especially collectibles, NFTs, all those assets have different attributes. They have different, the value changes, right? Like according to like what this is. Your collectible or that like memorability you have from like when you were 7 years old, if you're playing baseball or that same thing, that means something to you, right? And that value, that perceived value is different for you compared to every other individual. You can't model that on a lot of chains right now. Actually, it's impossible. And that's because of the data model that a lot of these existing blockchains are built on. So for us, it's like we've kind of redeveloped it from ground zero on like how do we address that so that now that Web3 can truly become the internet of assets, which is where we think the internet is going. So, and what does that mean to be built on chain? What does it mean to have dynamic composable assets that where not only can you verify ownership, but then you can see the record of contributions built by other people. I like to say the game, right, is kind of like, you have this item that you found, but you want to record all the experience points, all the augmentations, all the things, the crafting mechanics that you had onto that item. You can't do that with existing chains, but you can do it with Sui. So that's kind of like the vision that I got excited about, which has led me back into the Web3 rabbit hole for full time. So. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So I just want to move on to Jimmy, who's playing, I guess, at a layer above what Co is building. And so wanted to, and Nifty's, I think, has been the longest standing of the three projects here because a day in crypto they call is a year in real life. And so Nifty's has had or seen huge success in partnering with a lot of brands from sports to the Matrix. And so can you talk about how you are activating existing communities, with the diehards, and then also activating some of more of these skeptics and bringing them into your community?
Yeah, it's crazy that 1 year like makes the Nifty's the senior, like the old person on stage. I think for us, you know what? Actually, before I even say, I won't take credit. Is who we've worked with. I give a ton of credit to them of understanding the like, hey, we got to kind of give up ourselves. So we've worked a lot with Warner Brothers, and they're incredible IP. And we had we've had two programs with them, one around Space Jam and another around The Matrix. So the idea that they are giving that up to the community is like so foreign to a lot, these IP holders. Like that is what they have controlled for years and years and years. And I want to give them credit for saying, you know what, we're going to take some risks and we're going to give this back to the community. And that's a lot of what we do at Nifty's is like we want to be kind of the fan engagement platform that's powered by NFTs. So if you've got a thing that there are a lot of people that are fans of, bring it to us and we'll help you give that away in the right ways and reward the people that are really engaged in that. And they have been so willing to do that. The Matrix program for for you all, it was you bought an NFT, it looked like a very normal person, and then you got the choice to either give them a red pill or a blue pill, just like you did just like Neo did in the movie. And if you gave them the red pill, they had the cool leather outfit and tattoos and maybe some weapons, and like that was just cool for the fans to get to go through that. But the thing that was even more interesting to me is not the game of like what you would expect of, okay, is this person the one? They're going to go through missions, they're going to compete and look really cool in their leather. Is they actually let us tell the story of like maybe you didn't follow the people that told you should take the pill. That I could just do the blue pill. I could say like, no, I'm good with my job and I'm going to get to experience this thing. So what we're going to do for the person that chose to take the blue pill, that chose to continue to work at the metacortex, which is where Neo was this Thomas Anderson character. They're leaning into letting someone else take that story where it never went, and even rewarding people for that. So we're standing up, like there's competitions that they're going to, like Warner Brothers will actually reward people that are taking that path with Employee of the Month from Metacortex. Like there's just all these like new interesting rewards that like is 100% made them really uncomfortable to let somebody else play with that story, but they've been willing to allow it, and it's been great because there was already a fan base that like is rabid and has been thinking about this for 23 something years, and they're just now getting the opportunity to do that. And I think like the second part of maybe like people that are already bought into this world, and maybe people that are skeptical or new, I think kind of talking about like the shared experience that brings them together is where we focus. We don't to me, NFTs are a few years away of full adoption because the technology's got to fade into the background and allow people to be really excited about the thing that brought them all together. Not like the fact that the red pill, blue pill thing was an on-chain mechanic where one NFT was burned and another was sent to your, like, that's all fine, but like it had to be a really compelling experience with a narrative that everyone could kind of get into. So we've been really focused on the narrative, turning into Fire Mario, turning into the one, way more than like, let's lean into and educate every single thing that is about to happen. I mean, we want to make it as simple as possible to get into the thing that you love and really experience that in a new way.
And I saw Steven nodding as simple as possible, and he's been waiting super patiently. And I think Steven, earlier this year when you joined as CEO of Metaplex, I think you talked about how wanting to democratize all the Web3 tools for every creator. And so would just love to hear how you're doing that and managing your creator community as well as like the culture.
For sure. I was also nodding. I'm a huge Matrix fan, and I'm
Are you the one?
Team Red Pill. All the way, take the red pill. It's worth it. I also find that really fascinating because when we think about accessibility, we've primarily focused on supporting independent creators and artists, largely because it's hard to find a Warner Brothers or an IP like The Matrix that is really excited to embrace what's unique about Web3. And so we very much like lived in that world for the last year. And for collectors, accessibility with Metaplex and Solana means an NFT costs $1 to mint. It's less than a cent to send it around to transact. And that allows you to build things in like on-chain creator splits so that you can have multiple creators collaborating with royalties that are getting paid out. So there's a lot of accessibility that's just been made possible because of the fundamental efficiency of the Solana blockchain, which Metaplex is built on and has become that ubiquitous NFT protocol for. When we think then of developers, accessibility is about making the technology really easy to use. And right now, working with blockchains and specifically working with Solana is difficult. Solana is a different programming model. It uses Rust, so it's not an EVM system that even if you do know how to develop dApps, like you would be familiar with. And so Metaplex SDKs and reference implementations have been the go-to starting point for developers in the Solana ecosystem. And our commitment and the promise that we're working hard to deliver on is to make this technology as easy to use as any Web 2 tool that's out there. And that, like from a developer accessibility perspective, is when Web 3 just starts to be a part of the solution space that any Scrum team, any tech team can think about. The other piece of accessibility for us then is really on the creator and IP side. And so what we've seen over this last year is the development of what we really believe will be global brands. You have, like recently, a project called DGods. You have the Degenerate Ape Academy, which is one of our original OG projects. You have Solana Monkey Business. You've got games and metaverse experiences like Aurori and Star Atlas. And they're building stories, they're building IP, they're building communities from day one. And so that like interplay between the audience and the creator is really happening in this special way with these brands, what are becoming brands, but these crypto communities effectively that are now launching tokens and thinking about merchandise and having private parties. And there's this whole second order flywheel that's happening. And so now we're thinking about how do we support these projects from going, like now they have product market fit, they have a real community. How do we help them access like the sort of global distribution mechanisms that are available? And one of the things that makes me particularly optimistic that that can happen is if you know, with these chat applications like Line and Kakao Talk, you have these like franchises that are being born out of sticker packs. And it's like, I can totally see that path playing through, but even more so supercharged with like the inherently social aspects of these NFT communities. So we're thinking a lot about accessibility and like democratization. And I guess sort of circling back to the first conversation about how our community is getting it more multifaceted, we're really thinking about that as a theme that carries throughout the work that we're doing right now.
Yeah. It's like you read my mind for my last question for all of you. So a lot of the communities start online, and you've talked about how they've been doing now in-person or IRL events. And so could each of you kind of speak to your experiences on growing or what you've observed in terms of the intersection of these physical and digital communities? You can start, or go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I mean, I think just building off what I was discussing earlier, when market analysts look at the NFT space, they'll typically break it up into art and collectibles and then gaming, where art and collectibles is about 60%, gaming is about 30%, and then there's this kind of 10% experimental category. I think if you really look at what art and collectibles is becoming, it's really the beginning of Web3 social. And so there's this fractal community building process that's happening where you have crypto companies that are building platform technology and open source tools that are then being used to create communities. And there are sub-communities where if you have a specific, if you have a sombrero, like you're part of this special club that gets access to, a specific part of the metaverse. And so that sort of fractal culture building process that's happening in Web3 is really fascinating. And I think as technologists, thinking about how to facilitate that process is really interesting. And there's a lot of, I think, fast-moving intellectual work being done within the Web3 space right now that makes it a particularly good time if you're creative and excited about that kind of work.
Frankly, like the real world being enabled or unlocked in some way by NFTs is I'm a bit obsessed with it. And part of us working with Warner Brothers and some of the partners that we're going to be doing more with going forward, part of that is building out, okay, we're an engagement platform. A lot of that engagement is going to happen inside of, let's say, where NFTs live right now, which is like your crypto Twitter and Discord and, like on our site. But the goal is to capture all of engagement and have that rewarded or have that enabled in a new way. So we're spending a ton of time obsessing things with the Warner Brothers, in like, we're kind of in the entertainment space now, but as we're talking to a lot of people, it's like, what happens when someone shows up and can verifiably prove that they have been a fan of a thing, that they've engaged a bunch of times? That's going to replace or be the first time that either a brand or a creator can stand up a true reward experience in real life. And it's not, it can't just be like party access. So, for us, like in the entertainment space, it's like, what happens when you show up at the movie theater for the movie that you're really excited about, and you've already got the NFT? Like, what happens when you're watching it? How does that unlocked in a new way? And there's a ton of brands that are thinking about it. I think if you're thinking about it on the engagement front, the roads are leading to this happening, and NFTs and kind of blockchain being a huge part of it.
I actually have a different view because I come from the gaming world, and I think like gaming actually shows a lot of what I think the future can become on one sense. And it's mostly because people talk about metaverses, online communities, all that now. This has all existed in gaming for literally the last 20 years, if not probably longer than, for all of gaming's eternities, right? Like, because ultimately, gaming itself isn't really a consumer product. Gaming is meant to build social connection, right? And that was inherently how this product was built. And not only that, social connection off of leisure time, which means you really, really want to do it, right? Like, building a product for leisure time is infinitely harder than building a product for something that's necessary, right? Like, everyone has to eat, everyone needs housing. So, but not everyone needs to play a game, right? And so like, and leisure time is a lot smaller, right? Considering things. So I think a lot of stuff that we see in gaming is really interesting because you're already seeing people developing personalities depending on the game that they played and based on the communities that they interacted with that game. The difference right now is that for a long time, gaming included, all of these like digital universes has essentially been walled gardens, right? Fortnite is its own walled garden, like World of Warcraft its own walled garden, but people have been meeting in real life, right? They make connections and then they may find their significant other like outside of that, right? So, but so far, none of that interaction has occurred. Now the question is whether it should occur or whether people want it, which I think that is like the current debate right now, because I'm of the opinion, especially in the gaming community, that people are going to dedicate 80% of their time to a particular community. It's really hard for me to believe that you're going to create meaningful interaction by spreading yourself too thin. So I think what a lot is going to happen is people are going to use Web3 tools and a lot of these worlds to experiment with the identity that they want to build, but do that in parallel instead of like doing it in sequence. And then eventually like they're going to self-identify into what community that can be, and whether that's digital or in real life, that's yet to be determined, or it could be both. So I think like a lot of what we're seeing is just a proliferation of what I call like identity experimentation, especially in the early stages of like kind of like your identity. And then people are gonna go through many different stages of what that identity could be. And it could be that their real life identity is very different than what it means in this digital universe.
I really like that take. I think next year it's decentralized, or your identity online, pseudonymity, DAOs.
I mean, I'm doing investment deals with like totally anon people on Twitter, and it's really interesting. And sometimes I trust them more than people in real life. So it's like, yeah, I think it's like fascinating, right? I think a lot of the social mechanics are being like rewritten right now. So.
Yeah. That's really awesome, and I think great food for thought for the audience to leave on. So I just want to thank everyone, Ko, Jimmy, Stephen, for joining us. And yeah, don't be strangers. Come up to us and ask questions once we're off the panel. Thank you.
That was lovely. We do have time for a couple questions if you're all up for it, unless you're aching to sprint off stage. Okay, good.
Under spotlight.
Yeah, and you've definitely found your light, which is fantastic. Who has a question for these fine individuals? Yeah, okay, we're getting exciting over here. I'm going to come back.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I'm Elisa, I'm a founder from Mexico City. And my question is, maybe from a metrics perspective, when you're trying to build a community in Web3, like completely decentralized, how can you measure it's growing? How can you measure like it's receiving the value you are trying to deliver to your audience?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this one. So, like, the same themes that you would expect in Web 2 carry over to Web 3, but you're looking at different metrics, like different numbers. So for Metaplex, we're looking at active users, but we're defining that as wallet addresses, like cryptographic key pairs that are signing to our on-chain protocol within a given period of time, or wallets that are holding NFTs, which is like a specific activation concept for us. Then we're looking at transactions, so the number of transactions that are going through our on-chain protocol, and then the amount of gross merchandise value, so the total amount of commerce. You start to get to a certain point though, where those numbers look really good and you like check in on them every day and you're like, oh wow, like number goes up, like there's another 100,000. And so the other discipline that you have to get into is looking at growth rates. So looking week over week, like how much are we actually growing against those metrics and not getting too attached to the top line number.
Yeah, over here. Thanks so much. Question for you. So you guys mentioned a number of things about NFTs, really the future, like unlocking the social aspect, right? And these sub-communities forming not just with NFT holders, but NFT holders with specific attributes and that kind of stuff. But one thing I'm seeing as a Web3 founder, we have all this interaction that's taking place on centralized mediums, right? So Discord and Twitter and things like this, that like the communities themselves are being hosted on centralized platforms. And so just wondered on your thoughts about where we go from here, if there's anything you're looking at, if your specific companies are trying to address that, and yeah, or if even that's an issue. So
I can take a stab at this. So I think the whole Web 2, Web 3, like the dichotomy and people think about tools and all that, it shouldn't really all matter. As we said, like we know we're early when people still talk about the technology as like a descriptor for the product and the user experience, whereas in reality, people don't know, right? Like users don't know that an application's on AWS, right? Like why would you care? You don't call it an AWS. It's almost calling a game a TCP/IP game, like a game you play online, right? Like you don't describe a game that way, right? So I think for me, it's just more of like, you got to meet where the user's at, right? If the user is going to be more comfortable with, interacting with Discord or Twitter or these centralized platforms, so be it, right? Like you're a startup, you got to go meet where there's less friction, right? And then, but as part of that, right, you also have to think about how are you going to use that as a funnel back into like your user base, right? So if you are building an application on Web3, right, you kind of have to think about it as that, like, what does that funnel look like, right? And how do I get them in, and then how do I re-engage, right? If, let's say, you're building a social app. I mean, I'm kind of excluding the fact that there's a reason why there's not a lot of social media applications that are built on decentralized platforms, right? Because think about the amount of scale you have to get to do chat interactions or sticker packs and do all that on a chain, right? Like no chain can support that right now, at least no chain that's publicly live yet, right? So like I think like not that everything also has to be on chain. So I'm always a belief, go where the user is going to be and just understand how that funnels back into your product. So
yeah. That being said, I think communities have only formed really around NFTs around 2021, and so as an investor, I am seeing the beginnings of a lot of DAO tooling that are coming up. But as Ko mentioned, you need to first meet the users and the creators where everyone is at. And so
yeah. If I could just jump in quickly, like I do think that censorship resistance is important. Like I think ultimately the reason you use a blockchain is because of censorship resistance. So while I think there's a tactical game where you have to meet users where they are, you have to use the tools that are available, and like performance matters. So like the speed and like how fast that these services perform has been the main bottleneck. But I do think we're going to see a lot of progress in this summer as well. We already have on-chain messaging protocols, one called Dispatch that just launched a prototype on Solanart. And then the other big piece that you need to decentralize other than communication to make social media work is the social graph and identity. And so, at Metaplex, we have an identity standard, and we see like NFTs as the base identity object for Web3, and then the social graph getting layered on top of that. So I'm actually pretty optimistic we're gonna see those like feature complete Web3 social products roll out into the summer on Solana, and I think NFTs, Metaplex, we expect to be a big part of that.
Maybe I heard the question just a little bit differently. I think for me, I kind of mentioned like things fading into the background and focusing on the story and the experience and the reason why people came to something. And so for us, I mean, we will go where people are, but we'll probably go where places can apply the thing that people came there for in the first place. So Discord right now is incredible. Like, you know, I don't know if that's kind of what you meant of like the social tools that are used to, like, Discord is one of the easiest places to give a really new type of experience. I mean, it's every server can be its own story and its own experience, and we're tying it into the things that we're going to do on our platform, on our chain. You can, you know, like, you can experience that. We have a concept called XPs, you know, experience points. We're going to have all of that on chain that shows your, you know, how engaged you are, and all these like matrix missions. You can also earn that earn things that give you XP by being in part of the community and going through the story in Discord. So we're kind of going where like the best total experience is right now. There will be better and better ones that I think stick more to what this world actually wants, but we'll go where the best experience is.
And then honestly, like, a lot of those platforms make it really easy for you to A/B test your narrative, right? Like, what is your value prop, right? And I think for a lot of people going from 0 to 1, that's essentially what you're trying to figure out, right? Is what that value prop is. You don't want to build something that people don't want. So always use tools that exist to figure out what people want before you kind of commit the resources to it, right? So.
I love that. That's great. Just a shout out, because our 1:30 panel today is actually someone from Discord. So if that is part of your strat, that was a nice little parlay. Appreciate it. You're always looking out. Always looking out. I know we had some more questions in the middle here. Yes.
So I want to ask about the creatives and artists that haven't even tasted the Web3 and decentralized audience. And you know, because they are creatives and artists and they got no idea what to do and where to go, what would you advise them to do without having to learn everything about blockchains and wallets and which one to go to, which platform to use, decentralization, unless you recommend to do just that. So yeah, what would you recommend an artist or a creative who wants to do something like this?
Yeah, not to shill my portfolio, but I think Steven and Jimmy both have resources. So if one of you guys want to, both of you.
Please, yeah.
Me. Not to shill it, but like one of the programs that I'm most proud of is actually, we just launched something with like multi-hyphenate sort of cultural person, Lena Waithe. So she's in Master of None. And so if I say that name and it doesn't click, like, look her up. She's awesome. We launched a program with her where she curated a collection from incarcerated and formerly incarcerated artists, and it's called Bin Free. And she just this is a group that never has had relationships with people, and she wanted to use her platform and NFTs as kind of a delivery mechanism of building relationships, and the kind of the structure, the tech, the back end, you can be really thoughtful and, again, let that get out of the way. So all of the trading of all of their art will always be going back to either the formerly incarcerated artists, or the Huma House, which was an organization here in California that works on reintroducing people to society through art. All of that technology is on the back end. It was just storytelling. It was just relationship building. And like, if you're focused on that versus like what chain am I going to be on, you're going to have so much more success than like, is this the right tactic? Is this the right place to be? It's always going to be relationships over transactions for us.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. I think ultimately you want to enter the space with intention that's beyond just making money. I think that's the biggest mistake that artists and creators make, is they see a flashy headline and they're like, well, I just have to do this now. So I have to put out an NFT project. I think starting from somewhere that's personal, from a values perspective or a vision perspective, getting into the community, understanding what tools, what technology are available, researching and just getting into the mix, like showing love to projects that you admire. And then from there, trying to connect the two, like finding an opportunity where those values can be expressed with the technology. And I think some of the best projects come come from that. We've seen this, I think, recently with some of the fallout from the invasion of Ukraine. Our founding team, Everstake, is a Ukrainian team, and on top of that, we're now talking with crypto projects that are pivoting into social activism projects, and they're using NFTs as a way to build community with people who are displaced. We have one team that we're discussing, to support through a grant that's like trying to find a flight to Tijuana so they can make it into the U.S. and they're working on their PFP project in parallel. So there are things like that emerge that I think are surprising, but it sort of speaks to that, I think, to that core point, which is find something that like gets you excited from an impact perspective, and then be curious about the technology, and there's so much creative space open that if you lean in with that intention, like you're going to have a high degree of success.
Like the one yes and to all of that is like I think we're at this point with NFTs that they've cracked to a certain degree where we sit in pop culture. It's going to have to go past speculation. Like NFTs have to be much more than speculation. I think this moment of like maybe a little bit of a plateau with what NFT, there have to be more people that embrace what it can be more than just did this project mint out. And I like that's like creators I think are going to be such a huge catalyst for getting off of past that plateau.
Well, that was absolutely fabulous. Everyone, please give these individuals a wonderful round of applause.